Welcome back to This Week in Throws. Less groundbreaking, landscape shifting news this week. We don't have any. We do have one very interesting transfer of allegiance to talk about, but less significant than what we had last week. I am in a slightly different spot today. I just moved inside because there's a bunch of construction going on, as you can see by this lovely truck behind me. So that wasn't the best environment for filming. We're inside today. We're chilling. We've got some good throws to talk about, including a Diamond League. So let's get right into them. We're going to be starting with that Diamond League in Paris, where we saw women's discus and men's jab. The women's disc, oh boy. So I believe it was for the Rome Diamond League, where through 3 rounds, Valarie Allman was in like 5th. I talked about like, oh, I was prepping the tweet. I was like looking like, what's her win streak at right now? And like, in case she lost. This one was an even more extreme version of that because the Diamond League format that they changed to, I think last year, it might have been the year before, is where you cut down to, I think, 8 after 3 rounds. And then in the 6th round, it's just the top 3 that get a 6th attempt. And Valarie Allman was sitting in 3rd in the 6th round. And they do reverse order for that 6th round. So first goes first, second goes second, third goes third. So the person in 3rd has the final throw of the competition. Valarie Allman, her best on the day was 64.88, which was her first throw. And I think on her next 4, she had, I think, 2 fouls and then 2 throws that were like 62 something. Not very Valarie Allman-esque. This last throw was, though. Like, I was watching this. This was genuinely the first Diamond League of the entire season, I think, that I've actually watched live. So I was watching this one, and like, realistically, she stepped into the ring, and I'm like, there's no way Val's actually gonna lose this. And she knew it right out of her hand. Might be the loudest I've ever heard her yell on a throw. And she takes the win, 67-56 in round 6. She ended up winning the competition by over a meter. She's inevitable. But I think the most interesting thing coming out of this one is second place, Jorinda van Klinken. Leading for most of the way, she threw 66.42, which I believe is a season's best for her. And so Jaime Perez finished 3rd, throwing 65.03. And Jaime, all things considered, is, I think, the second best thrower in the world this year, behind Val. But she's not going to, in all likelihood, unless something drastically changes in the next couple weeks, she's not going to be at Worlds. And so when you're looking at who else is going to take silver behind Val, if you're trying to make predictions for that, I think Jorinda's clearly the favorite for silver right now because she's thrown really well pretty much every meet she's been in, distance-wise. When you look at placement and you go through her last 7 competitions, she was 4th in Xiamen, 2nd in Shanghai. Those are both Diamond Leagues. 2nd in Halle, 2nd in Dresden, 3rd in Rome, Diamond League, 2nd in Stockholm, which I think it was technically at a Diamond League, but I don't think it was a Diamond League event. And then now 2nd in Paris. So, I mean, she's been runner-up 5 of those 7 competitions. I think 4 of them have been behind Val. So, yeah, Jorinda is putting together an excellent body of work. And, I mean, it feels like she's just been building towards this throughout her entire career, but she still hasn't managed to get that global medal. And it really feels like this year is the year where that's going to kind of reverse and her fortunes are going to flip. And I think there's really nothing aside from weird world championships, women's discus, like black magic that we've seen in Budapest and in Eugene in 2022. Barring any of that happening, I think there's very little in the way. I don't want to say very little in the way because there's a lot of really good women. But if Yorinda can continue building her season the way she has so far, like I said, she's a very clear favorite for silver. And then staying on this for a second, on women's discus, Val also a couple days later competed at the Helena Konopaka Classic, which is a really cool all women's meet in Europe with a ton of history. And she did not waste any time winning this one. She threw 68.87. Good lord. 68.87 in round one to take the win there. Really, like, her only competition there was Jaime, and I think Jaime threw, like, 64.5, so not her best day. But yeah, Val just continues to be unstoppable, shut the door really quick, saved Zeb a lot of stress. And yeah, they're rocking and rolling. Back to Paris for the Diamond League men's javelin competition. This one, I mean, the top two was surprise, surprise, Neeraj Chopra and Julian Weber. Neeraj went 88.16. Julian went 87.88. Both of them threw their best marks of the day in round one. So their positions didn't change. Nobody really challenged them throughout the rest of the competition. So not the most exciting stuff. Neither of them really had like that good of series either. I think Neeraj had one more throw over 85. I don't think Julian had another throw over 85. They really set the bar quite high for themselves with how they threw in Doha. That, like, you look at a competition where they go 88 and then 87 high, and you're just like, okay. I mean, it's those two, it feels like men's jav is going to be tough. Jakub Vadlich seems like he's lost a step this year. I need to double check his World Athletics page after recording, but like I know his opener, I think in Doha, was not super exciting. And yeah, he just hasn't, I don't know if it's injury, but he just hasn't necessarily looked like himself. And so when you look at the top two, like, it's pretty clearly Neeraj and Julian right now. It's hard to gauge where exactly Arshad Nadeem is at and where he'll be when Tokyo rolls around. But just looking at resumes that have been built throughout the season, I think the battle between Neeraj and Julian when we get to Tokyo is going to be so much fun to watch. And another name that has inserted himself into the mix this year is Brazil's Luis Mauricio da Silva, who threw another South American record. I think this might be his third of the season. Now he's just resetting his own record over and over again. He went 86.62 to finish third here. So he did get, I mean, almost within a meter of Julian for second. But yeah, Julian and Neeraj in the men's jav this year seem like they're a step ahead of the rest of the world to some extent. But Luis Mauricio da Silva, like, don't let that take away from the very impressive season that he's putting together for himself and for Brazil. Alrighty, moving along to some women's hammer now. There's an excellent competition in Quartane, Kuortane, Kuortane? I don't know. Somewhere in Finland, where Cameron Rogers threw 76.45. She's so good. And every series she puts together is just so consistent. Like, this one, I think her worst throw was like 74.50 or something. Like, Cam's a beast. And I mean, I've said it every week, and it's just easy to keep saying it about the women's hammer because they throw so well every week. And there's so many of, like, the absolute best in the event's history competing right now. But if everyone gets to Tokyo healthy, without foul issues, that could be easily one of the best events of the entire championships, not just in the throws, not just in the field, in the entire sport. Women's hammer is one. It'll, like, no matter how good they throw, unfortunately, it's going to go vastly underappreciated. But not by me and not by the subscribers of this channel. But by the broader track and field world, they won't necessarily understand the insanity that could go down in Tokyo. I'll do my best to help them understand, though. But yeah, that's shaping up to just be absolutely legendary. And another name in the mix that could make it an even more legendary competition is Finland's Krista Tervo, because she went 76.08 in this meet to back up her 77.14 from 2.5 weeks ago. And it was really encouraging to see this mark from Krista, because I forget if it was in Finland where she threw her 77, but then she comes back. Her next competition was in Hengelo, throws this huge, historically really good mark, and then is competing in front of a home crowd in Turku and doesn't quite live up to it. I think she failed to break 70 that day even. But then she bounces right back. And so now it's like, okay, she threw 77.14. Now she's thrown 76.08. Like, this is legit. It's not just a one-time thing. It's a thing where if she's on, she could easily, well, maybe not easily, because if everything goes according to plan, fingers crossed 77.14 wouldn't make the podium at Worlds. But she could definitely be a contender easily. And also in this competition, you had Silja Kosonen, the other really good Finnish thrower, who threw 72.90, and then Olympic bronze medalist Annette Chikkenwoke. No, Olympic silver medalist. I'm very sorry, Annette. That was disrespectful. Olympic silver medalist Annette Chikkenwoke threw 72.36. Solid mark for Annette. But the most interesting storyline of the week in the women's hammer, and this is one that has kind of been on the radar for a couple months now, but really making her presence felt now at the European Team Championships for Albania, is Yipsy Moreno, the 2008 Olympic champion in the women's hammer. She took 11 years off. For those of you that aren't familiar with Yipsy, she used to compete for Cuba. Olympic champion in 2008, two-time world champion. And her Olympic resume, fourth at the 2000 Olympics, second in 2004, Olympic champion in 2008, and then fifth in 2012. And then she takes 11 years off, transfers allegiance to Albania sometime within that span, and she comes back and she threw 67.96 at the European Team Championships this week. That's a really good mark for a 44-year-old who took 11. I mean, I don't know how much she's been training in the last 11 years, but for not competing for 11 years, and this was her fifth or sixth competition of the year. She already had thrown 66 something, a couple 65s. So she's shown she's still got it. But I mean, if she keeps building off of this, she's got time the standard might be a bit rich, but it's not like she's really got any competition in Albania. So she's got plenty of time to potentially rack up some world ranking points. It's not an absurd thing to say that in 2025 we could see Yipsy Moreno at the World Championships representing Albania, which is a really funny thing to think about. It'd also be really fun to see her versus Anita again, because, I mean, it's just one of the greatest hammer throwers in history who was followed up kind of by the greatest hammer thrower in history. And now they're both kind of, towards the end of their, well, I don't know, maybe Yipsy is just getting started again. But yeah, seeing them one more time at a world championship setting would be so much fun. Moving on to women's javelin now, and I'm aware that last week I had floated the idea of women's javelin power rankings. I lost track of time this week, as you can tell by this coming out late on Thursday. I will have those next week though, and I pinky promise on that. Okay, women's jav though. Really, the biggest competition we have, I guess, was in Ostrava, where Adriana Vlagos started to look a little bit like the Adriana Vlagos we saw at the beginning of the season. She went 64.87 to take down Haruka Kitaguchi by almost a full meter. Haruka threw 63.88. And like at this point in her career, you're never really concerned about the way Haruka is throwing like outside of a global championship because she just always brings it when she has to. And like she maybe sometimes will have a not so pretty diamond league or something like that. Like last year, I think she really didn't throw that well at the London Diamond League, which was like 2 weeks before Paris, and then she wins Olympic gold. So not like I am past the point of really taking conclusions away from how Haruka performs prior to Tokyo. Unless if she performs really well, then I'll be like, all right, she's on fire, she's unstoppable, like she's a lock. But if it seems like a little bit behind of where the defending world and Olympic champion should be, I'm not going to raise any red flags. Also, I think I'm making it sound like 63.88 is a bad mark when it really isn't. That's pretty dang good. But for Adriana Vlagos, she opened her season so well with two huge throws back to back. But then once she started getting into these bigger competitions with some of the women who will be her real competitors when Tokyo rolls around, she hasn't necessarily been at the same level. This is a really encouraging step towards that. Not only the mark, but also obviously, beating Haruka and who she is. It's really good stuff for Adriana Vlagos. The mark and the win. Men's shot put now. Good week to be Italian. Leo Fabri comes through with the biggest mark of the week with 21.70 to take the win in Ostrava. He's moving up the like global. Maybe I'll make men's shot put power rankings too. Who knows? But yeah, he's the only man this year over 22. Now he throws 21.70 to take down his fellow countryman Zane Weir, who Zane had a good week too, throwing 21.59. I believe that was in a meet in Italy, and then he threw 21.39 in Ostrava. But for Leo, like the indoor season wasn't great for him. That might be a bit of an understatement, honestly. And then the start of the outdoor season wasn't terrible, but when it's living up to the trying to live up to the expectation of his first like 2 months of the outdoor season last year, where he was throwing like 22.80 basically once a week, it felt like. That's a hard thing to do. And then on a similar note, it's also hard as a fan or as an analyst, if I feel like calling myself that. It's hard to kind of reframe your expectations and be like, that was a historically great stretch he was on, but he doesn't need to live up to that every competition to still be a good, effective, successful thrower. And so, he's building really well. 21.70 is a really, really good mark. That's a mark that would win world championships a decade and a half ago or whatever. And 22.31, I believe, which he threw a couple weeks ago to finally break 22, like that would pretty much win any world championship before Doha, I think, aside from like the Olympics in 2016. But yeah, like it's really, really impressive what Leo's still being able to do this year, and something we just kind of need to remind ourselves of and not get jaded by just how insanely good we expect. Like the fact that we expect 22 meters to be the usual in the men's shot put is such a luxury that we can't just take for granted sometimes. And we still need to find a way to appreciate throws that aren't necessarily 2250 or 2295 or anything like that. Like 2170, it's a really good mark, Leo. Good job. Alrighty. Let's talk men's discus now, because it was another pretty crazy week with 3 men over 70 in Juvin at the Heino Lip Memorial, which is the same competition. That name is always just going to be stuck in my head, because the 2023 edition of this meet, you had Christian Che take the win at 71.86, and Daniel Stahl was runner-up at 71.45. And I'm just like, good Lord, that was nuts. And they were both back. They're back at the Heino Lip Memorial in Juvin, Estonia. And they both broke 70 again. Christian Che went 70-17 for, I think that's his, 800th time over 70 this season already. So he's putting together some good throws. Right behind him, I think he threw 70-17 on either his 5th or 6th round throw. I might just be making that up. But he nipped Daniel Stahl, who threw 70-14, just by a smidge. And so Daniel Stahl in 2025 has thrown over 70 meters twice now. That's so exciting. It really looked like last year, he's had such an insane career. And he's been at the top of the discus world for a decade now. And so it would have been perfectly fine if his career kind of started to peter out last year. But he's showing that he's not letting that happen. It is not his time to ride off into the sunset. And Daniel Stahl is still here to play. And it's going to be probably winning a medal in Tokyo would probably be, for anyone that's one of the top discus throwers in the world, it's probably going to be the hardest medal of their career at this point. But Daniel Stahl he's doing everything he needs to do to prove he's more than capable of doing that. So 70 meters plus for both Christian Che and Daniel Stahl. But neither one of them were the world leader for the week, because that honor belongs to Lolasson Djouhan of France, a 34-year-old man who threw a 3.5 meter PB in a place not called Ramona, Oklahoma. What the heck? In ALES, and judging by what little I know about French pronunciation, I'm going to assume that's pronounced Ale. In Ale, France, he threw 70-25. The first Frenchman to break 70. I believe he is the 10th man this year over 70 meters, if you include Marcus Gustafson's 70-meter throw that was at an uncertified meet or something. So men's discus is nuts. And this might be a contender for my worst name pronunciation ever. Jordan? I was so... Before I started recording this video, I was telling myself in my head, trying to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. And I was really confident about it, but I think I'm going to be wrong. Jordan Guahesem. Jordan Guahesime through 68.51. 3-meter PB for him. So now I think they're 1-3 in French history now. Just what a competition. And, they haven't necessarily, I need to see them do that against, in a more competitive field, before I can really throw their name into, the contender pool for Tokyo. But for Lolasson, like, this is just such a huge barrier to be breaking, especially at his age. Like, this is you don't often see 34-year-olds throw 70 for the first time, especially when they've never really been around that area before. So this is definitely one of the cooler performances of the year, I think. And a final note on men's discus is for the first time in a while, I think, we had pseudo German championships, part like 7, where you have the top 5 German throwers that went head to head to head to head to head in Schonbeck. Mika Sosna took the win at 67.56. I think Mika is probably the safest bet, I'd think, to make the German team. I believe the way that they do selection is top 2 at German champs, and then there's a discretionary selection. Mika's been thrown so well all year, and I believe he is the youngest of this group, but like I'd be stunned if he isn't in Tokyo. Henrik Janssen was second at 66.32. Steven Richter, a hair behind him at 66.30. Clemens Prüfer, fourth at 65.43. And then Daniel Jasinski was fifth among the German cohort at 64.37. So, yeah, I mean, what more can you say? A nation has 5 guys runs or throw. Ugh, I'm sorry for saying run. That disgusts me. A nation has 5 guys throw 64.37 at the same meet, and it's pretty far behind their season's best for every single one of them. That is just insanity. All right, well, I think this is breaking a record for the shortest edition of This Week in Throws. The schedule just, it feels like it is slowing down a little bit as we kind of get into the middle of the summer, but with this long of a season, it makes perfect sense, especially as we're starting to near US trials and national championships and stuff. So people are probably starting towards their peak for those competitions. So they don't necessarily need to be competing like every weekend or whatever. But coming up on deck, we've got the Ironwood Throws Classic is going on this weekend, which should have some really strong marks that come out of it. And then in about 2 weeks' time is the pre-classic, which I am so excited for. I believe they're having every throw, men's and women's, except javelin, and I believe they have the Olympic champion for every event competing. Pending Ryan Krauser's health, haven't really heard any updates on him since I spoke with him at the WSPS a little over a month ago now. But I haven't seen anything that says he's like pulled out yet. So I'll double check after I'm done recording, and I'll pop back in during editing if anything has changed. But I haven't seen anything that says he's pulled out for any reason. So I'm clinging on to hope we'll see his opener in about 2 weeks, but really can't be sure about that. So yeah, Priya's, I mean, that's going to be, I think it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we've still got some time before that one, but I'm getting hyped for that one. The European Throwing Cup, or the European Team Championships, a different type of ETC, is going on this week. So there should be some good marks that come out of that. Not exactly sure who will be competing, but I'm excited for those ones. And then there's probably going to be like 3 or 4 random meets in Germany that have some crazy marks. So yeah, we'll still have stuff to talk about, even if it is, coming down a little bit. But that's all I've got. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe and follow the podcast. And the Twitter is P. Hoff Mahoney. The Instagram is Paulie Throws. And I will see you guys next time.